They said the world was civilized. They said humanity had learned from history. They said war was a thing of the past. But all it took was one bullet. And the world discovered just how easily civilization can burn. The year was 1914. Europe was proud, polished, glowing with confidence. Empires were rising. Armies were expanding. Nations believed they were unstoppable. But pride is a fragile thing. And when pride is armed, it is dangerous. Beneath the polished surface, the continent was a pressure chamber. Old rivalries. Secret alliances. A race for power, land, and global influence. It wasn't peace. It was silence before the thunder. Then, on a quiet street in Sarajevo, the silence shattered. A young assassin raised a gun. A trigger was pulled. And the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne fell. It should have been a local tragedy. A headline that faded in a week. But that one moment slammed into history like a hammer. Because Europe was tied together by promises. Promises to defend each other. Promises to take sides. Promises made in the name of honor. And honor can be a dangerous master. Mobilization began. Trains rolled. Orders were signed. Borders closed. The world didn't decide to go to war. It simply slid into it. As if pushed by the weight of history itself. Shift tone, colder. When the soldiers reached the front, they didn't find glory. They found mud. They found trenches, miles and miles of them. They found a war that chewed men alive. Machine guns that turned charges into graveyards. Artillery that rained steel from the sky. Poison gas that crawled across the earth like a living nightmare. This was not a war of knights or heroes. This was industry. Mechanization. Death, produced in mass quantity. And the world was not ready. More emotional, slower. Letters home spoke in careful words. I am fine. The weather is cold. We hope to be home by Christmas. But the truth was written between the lines. Fear, exhaustion, and the quiet knowledge that home might never be seen again. Meanwhile, civilians fought their own war. Mothers lined up for bread. Children waited for news that never came. Entire nations were learning to live with grief. And when the war finally began to break, the world tried to count the cost. But how do you count millions of lives? How do you count cities erased? How do you count the silence left behind? When whole generations disappear. Empires collapsed into dust. Austria-Hungary, gone. The Ottoman Empire, broken. Russia, overturned by revolution. Germany, defeated, but humiliated. And humiliation can be the most dangerous seed of all. Leaders gathered to draw new borders. Sign new documents. Promise new peace. But peace built on punishment is not peace. It is waiting. And the world did not realize that the war had not ended. It had only paused. Dramatic, final line. One bullet started the fire. One war reshaped the earth. But the ashes left behind were already forming the shadow of the next. Across Europe, entire generations carried wounds no doctor could treat. Soldiers returned home with eyes that had seen too much. And hearts that no longer knew where they belonged. Families set an extra plate at dinner tables. Not because they expected their sons to walk through the door. But because they could not yet accept that they never would. Cities tried to rebuild. But how do you rebuild something that was shattered from the inside? A child growing up in those years did not learn stories of glory. They learned stories of hunger. Of loss. Of promises that leaders broke, and people paid for. And in that silence, in that grief, In that unanswered pain, a question began to grow. A dangerous question. Was this sacrifice for nothing? And when a nation begins to ask that, history prepares itself for the next storm.